She took Mom's sapphire ring while the body was still warm. That's what the funeral director whispered to me while my sister, Rachel, posed for photos wearing Mom's pearl necklace. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. Because I had something she never saw coming. A handwritten letter, signed by Mom. And a lawyer who owed me a favor from 10 years ago. My sister stole a few gems. But me, I took the entire estate. Mom passed on a Monday. Softly, quietly, like a candle going out in a room we forgot to light. She was in her favorite armchair, wrapped in the quilt I made for her in high school. And when I found her, her hands were still warm. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone at first. I just sat there, beside her, like I used to when I was little. She used to hum lullabies while brushing my hair in that exact spot. Now it was my turn to sit with her in silence. Rachel showed up that night, late, loud. Her perfume hit the hallway before her heels did. She hugged me like it was a performance, like someone was watching. And then she looked around the room and asked where the safe was. Not how Mom passed, not if I was okay, just the safe. I told her it was still in the closet, where it had always been. She smiled thin and tight and said, "Good to know." The next morning, I found her in Mom's room. The drawers were open, velvet boxes scattered across the bed like torn confetti, the sapphire ring gone, the ruby brooch from Grandma gone. She looked at me and shrugged. Well, she's not wearing them anymore. And then she laughed. I wanted to scream, like to slap that smirk off her face, but I didn't. I said nothing, because I knew something she didn't. Mom had left me a letter, folded, handwritten, tucked under the pillow of the guest bed where I had been staying. It wasn't long, but it changed everything. Just a few lines. If anything happens to me, give this to Mr. Evans. He knows what to do. Love. Mom. Mr. Evans wasn't just anyone. He was the estate lawyer Mom had trusted since Dad passed. But more than that, he was my old professor at UGA, back when I was studying pre-law. He once told me, "If you ever need help in life, call me. Just once." That promise echoed in my head like a bell. Rachel didn't know about the letter or the favor. She was too busy playing heiress. By Thursday, she had moved into the master bedroom, started rearranging furniture, tossing Mom's keepsakes into boxes labeled donate. She called our cousins, said she'd be hosting a celebration of life that weekend. She wore Mom's pearls, Mom's scarf, even Mom's perfume. It was like she wanted to become her, or erase her. Maybe both. Meanwhile, I sat at the kitchen table, dialed Mr. Evans, and waited. When he picked up, his voice cracked. "Is it time?" he asked. I whispered, "Yes." And I told him about the letter. We met the next morning at his office downtown Savannah. Brick building. No sign. Just his name on a gold plate. He read the letter in silence, then opened a locked drawer in his desk. Inside was a folder. I recognized Mom's handwriting on the label. He looked at me and said, "Your mother updated her will. This is the real one. Signed, dated, notarized, witnessed." Rachel's name was nowhere on it. I didn't smile, didn't cry. I just sat there holding that folder, breathing like I hadn't in days. Mr. Evans leaned forward. "You want to file it?" I nodded. Quietly, he smiled. "I figured you'd say that." I didn't return home right away. After filing the new will with Mr. Evans, I sat in Forsyth Park for nearly an hour watching the fountain, listening to birds, trying to remember what breathing felt like without grief clinging to every inhale. The sky was bruised with the colors of early spring. Soft gray, pale blue. Hints of pink that made me think of Mom's favorite scarf. The one Rachel wore like a trophy. When I finally did return to the house, it no longer felt like a home. It felt occupied. Like Rachel had taken the walls and filled them with her noise. Her laughter that rang hollow. Her heels tapping like a countdown. She had even moved Mom's wedding portrait. Said it was too old-fashioned, and replaced it with a beach print she brought from L.A. The frame was crooked. That night, she invited people over, some cousins, a few friends from high school she barely kept in touch with. They drank wine, laughed loudly, played music Mom would have hated, and all the while, Rachel floated through the house like she owned it, wearing Mom's ring like it belonged on her hand. She introduced herself as the eldest daughter and only surviving heir. I said nothing, but I took photos, not of her, not to humiliate her, but of every detail she tried to erase, the photos she removed, the boxes she labeled, the piano she put a for sale sign on. Because evidence matters, even when you already have the truth. Rachel never noticed. She never asked me how I was holding up, never asked if I needed anything, not even a glass of water. Grief, to her, was a performance, a mirror she could stand in front of and say, "Look how strong I am." But strength doesn't need an audience, and justice doesn't need applause. The next day, Mr. Evans called. The will had been accepted. Court was scheduled in 3 weeks. He asked if I wanted to tell Rachel. I said no. Let her live in the illusion a little longer. Let her decorate what wasn't hers. Because soon, she'd learn what it meant to hold something that never belonged to you. In the meantime, I visited Mom's garden. It was the only place Rachel hadn't touched. Maybe because there was no glamour in it. No audience, just dirt and memory. I pulled weeds, pruned roses, watered the hydrangeas Mom adored, and I talked to her every day. I told her what Rachel was doing, what I was doing, what I planned to do, and I asked quietly that she stay close. Grief makes you believe in things you used to mock, like signs and spirits, and the way wind moves through branches when no one else is around. One morning, I found a small bird's nest on the porch. New, fragile, perfectly built in the corner where Mom used to sit with her tea. I smiled, because it felt like a beginning, not an ending. Rachel, meanwhile, had begun taking inventory. She claimed she was doing it for clarity, but I knew better. She was listing valuables, the vintage china, the antique mirror, the silver cutlery set that belonged to our great-grandmother. She even asked me if I had seen Mom's deed. I played dumb. She smirked, assuming superiority. That night, she printed flyers for an estate sale, scheduled the day before our court hearing. She handed me one like it was an invitation. I took it, folded it, and slid it into the same envelope where I kept the letter from Mom. People talk about revenge like it's a loud thing. A scream, a slap, a door slammed shut. But the best kind is quiet, patient, legal. 2 days before the hearing, Mr. Evans and I met again. He was calm, steady. The way you want someone to be when your whole world is shifting. He had everything prepared. The witness statements, the video Mom recorded with the hospice nurse, the notarized documents, the timeline, the property records. I signed where I needed to and walked out of his office knowing the truth wasn't just on my side. It was signed, stamped, sealed. The night before court, Rachel threw a final party. She called it a farewell to grief. She wore white, said she was going to start fresh after this. She gave away some of Mom's scarves to her friends, told them they were just collecting dust. I watched from the hallway, didn't say a word, but I remembered every scarf, every piece of jewelry, every spoon she pocketed. Because tomorrow, I wouldn't need to remember anymore. The court would. The morning of the court hearing, the house was eerily quiet. Rachel wasn't up yet, or maybe she was pretending to sleep, knowing something was coming. I brewed coffee the way Mom liked it, black, strong, with a pinch of cinnamon. It was muscle memory, a ritual that made me feel steady, and then I got dressed. Not for war, for peace, but the kind of peace that comes after a long, quiet storm has passed. When I walked into the courthouse, I wasn't nervous. I was still focused. I carried 2 things in my bag the letter Mom left me. and the flyer Rachel had printed for the estate sale, because one was love, and the other proof of arrogance. Rachel arrived 15 minutes late, wearing a tailored dress, oversized sunglasses, and Mom's sapphire ring. She walked like a woman who had already won. But when her eyes met mine, she hesitated. Just for a second. Because I wasn't the version of me she expected. I wasn't the quiet girl in the kitchen anymore. I was calm, prepared, and she was about to find out what that meant. We entered the courtroom, a modest one, nothing dramatic, just a judge, a clerk, some wooden pews. But to me, it felt like a cathedral, a sacred place where truth would finally speak louder than pretense. Rachel's lawyer was aggressive, claimed the new will was forged, said Mom was confused, unwell. He gestured toward Rachel like she was the grieving angel of this story. But then, Mr. Evans spoke, measured, sharp, not a single word wasted. He laid out the timeline, presented the witnesses, played the video. The room went still when Mom's voice filled the air. She looked directly into the camera and said, "If Rachel's in this room, I want you to know this was never hers. She wasn't here. But my daughter, the one holding this camera, she was. Every day, every tear, every meal, this is hers." Rachel looked away. She crossed her arms, bit her lip, but said nothing. And the judge, he didn't ask many questions, just nodded, took his time, then looked directly at me and said, "You may proceed with the estate transfer." It was done, not with fireworks, but with quiet finality, like a door softly closing on a chapter that never belonged to her. When we walked out, Rachel didn't speak to me. She just pulled off Mom's ring and tossed it in her purse like it meant nothing. But I knew better, because now she had nothing. And I had the truth, and every room in the house to fill with peace again. I didn't go back to the house right away, after the judge ruled in my favor. I stood outside the courthouse steps in Savannah, watching the moss sway from the oaks above like slow, heavy confetti falling just for me. It didn't feel like victory, not the loud kind. Anyway, it felt like silence finally getting the last word. Rachel stormed past me in heels too high for the truth. She didn't say a word, just looked through me like I wasn't real. But I was real now. Legally, publicly, permanently. The estate was mine. Every paper said so. The house, the land, the family trust Mom had built over decades quietly, consistently. Rachel thought she'd inherit it all with charm and lipstick, but blood isn't always thicker than signatures. I drove home slowly, let the hum of the wheels keep my thoughts steady. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a long time. The house looked different. It always did after Mom's hydrangeas bloomed, but this time, it wasn't just the flowers. It was mine now, not borrowed, not begged for. Mine. When I stepped inside, it was like breathing in a space that had been holding its breath. Boxes were still stacked in the corner from Rachel's inventory. Labels with her handwriting messy, rushed, entitled. She had tried to erase Mom from every room, but she missed the corners, the cracks, the quiet places where memory lives. I walked through the house like I was saying hello, to the kitchen that still smelled faintly of cinnamon, to the piano that hadn't been played in weeks, to the hallway mirror where Mom used to fix her hair. Everything she touched still whispered her name. I sat at the dining table, the one Rachel almost sold, placed my palms on the wood, and for the first time, I cried, not out of grief, not out of anger, but from the weight of being seen, finally, by the law, by the world, maybe even by Mom. I spent the next few days undoing Rachel's changes, her mess, her chaos. I pulled down her beach prints and rehung the wedding portrait. I unpacked the boxes labeled donate and placed each item where it belonged. I reopened Mom's recipe journal and placed it back on the counter right next to the flour canister she loved. It was a resurrection, room by room. I brought my mother back to life, not in body, but in essence. In wallpaper she chose. In teacups she saved. In the quiet hum of the freezer she refused to replace because it still worked just fine. Rachel texted once. Just one line. Hope you're happy. I didn't respond. Because happiness wasn't the goal. Closure was. Mr. Evans came by that weekend. Brought the final deeds and transfer documents. He sat at the same table he'd once shared coffee with my mother over contracts and bank statements. He looked around the house and smiled. She'd be proud, he said. And I believed him. We signed papers for nearly an hour. Every signature felt like a brick being laid into the foundation of something solid, permanent, unshakable. That night, I opened the old cedar chest at the foot of Mom's bed. Inside were things even Rachel hadn't touched. Old letters, Polaroids, and a velvet pouch. When I opened it, I gasped. The real sapphire ring, not the replica Rachel wore. This one had the engraving on the inside to E.S., my always. It was from Dad. Rachel never knew it existed. She'd stolen costume jewels, thinking she was rich. But the real heirlooms Mom hid them where only love could find them. I slipped the ring on. It didn't fit perfectly, but it didn't have to. It was never about size. It was about belonging. Over the next few weeks, I reached out to the neighbors, told them the estate sale was canceled, invited them over for iced tea, just like Mom used to. We sat on the porch, under the creaky ceiling fan, telling stories about her. How she gave away tomatoes from the garden to anyone who needed them. How she always remembered birthdays, even if she forgot what day of the week it was. One neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, brought me a scrapbook Mom had given her years ago. Inside was a quote taped to the cover. "We are not remembered by what we take, but by what we give back." I closed the book and held it to my chest, because that was Mom. Always giving, even when it cost her. I decided then to set up a scholarship in her name, for women returning to school after caring for aging parents, because I knew what that journey felt like, and I wanted to turn pain into purpose, just like she would have. Rachel never contacted me again. Last I heard, she moved back to Los Angeles, sold the fake ring to a pawn shop, and started over. Maybe that's what she needed. Maybe she thought she was owed something because she missed what mattered. But I didn't owe her anything. Not anymore. One morning, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. Birds chirped, hydrangeas bloomed. The air was soft with summer. And in that moment, for the first time in months, I felt still, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. And sometimes, that's more than enough. The next weekend. I opened the front door to a knock. It was the hospice nurse who had been with Mom in her final weeks, Linda. She was holding a brown envelope and a shy smile. "Your mom asked me to give you this," she said. "Not until after it's all done." My hands shook when I took it. Inside was a letter. Her handwriting was soft, curving, familiar, like she had written it slowly, with care. "My darling, if you're reading this, then everything has unfolded exactly the way I hoped it would. I know you never liked confrontation, but I also know you are stronger than you've ever been told. This house was never just about walls. It was about everything we built inside them. You were here for every appointment, every soup, every silence. You are my home now, my living legacy. Love always. Mom." I cried again, but it wasn't grief anymore. It was release. Like every part of me she'd touched, had finally settled into place. Later that day, I went upstairs and opened every window. Let the light in. Let the air move freely. The house no longer felt heavy. It felt alive. And I knew, in a way deeper than words, that I wasn't just living in Mom's house anymore. I was carrying her forward into every new breath. There's something strange about silence after a storm. It's not empty. It's not peaceful. It hums. Like the walls themselves are catching their breath. That's what the house felt like in the weeks that followed. Not quiet, exactly. Just catching up. I began every morning in the garden. Not out of duty, but devotion. Pulling weeds, humming softly. Barefoot in the soil the way Mom used to be. I watered the hydrangeas like I was offering the earth a secret, and each bloom felt like a whisper back. Inside, I rearranged the furniture not to erase Mom, but to live with her. I opened doors that hadn't been touched in years, found an old sewing machine, her apron, a half-finished quilt. She was everywhere, but never haunting, always warm. I didn't hear from Rachel. No emails, no calls, just silence. Part of me expected her to return with more lawyers, some new scheme, but she didn't. I think she knew it was over. She'd lost more than a case. She'd lost the mask she wore for years, and when that falls, there's nothing left to pretend with. One afternoon, I walked past the mirror in the upstairs hallway, the one Mom never replaced, even after the frame cracked, and I saw myself, really saw myself, not as the quiet daughter, not as the shadow in the corner, but as a woman standing in the center of her story. That night, I hosted dinner, just for a few neighbors, but it mattered. I used the good china, cooked the cornbread from Mom's recipe, set the table with linen napkins she'd tucked away for someday. I decided someday had finally come. We ate under the porch light, laughter soft and glowing. Mrs. Holloway brought sweet tea. Mr. Keller shared a story about Mom dancing in the rain once with a broken umbrella and no shame. We toasted to her memory not with sadness, but with delight. And in that moment, I realized something: grief is not what ends us. It's what shapes us into who we were always meant to be. The next morning, I opened the safe, not because I needed anything, but because I was finally ready. Inside were documents I hadn't seen yet, tax returns, a life insurance policy, and a notebook. A blue leather-bound notebook. It had my name written in Mom's handwriting across the top. Inside were pages and pages of thoughts. Letters she'd written over the years but never sent. To me. You were always the one who stayed quiet when it mattered most. And somehow, you understood more in silence than Rachel ever did in sound. I read until my eyes burned. She had written about my first heartbreak, my graduation, the night I cried on the porch thinking no one noticed. She noticed. Every time. I didn't always say the right things, but I watched you become a woman who led with grace, not noise. This house is yours because you filled it with love even when no one was looking. I held the notebook to my chest and wept, not from pain, but from being known. Weeks passed. I painted the front porch, repaired the screen door, donated the clothes Mom asked me to, kept the ones she never mentioned. Because love isn't always about instruction. It's about instinct. I turned the upstairs guest room into a writing nook, framed old letters, set out a pot of fresh lavender, started journaling again, not for the world to read, just for me. I remembered how much I loved to write, how Mom once told me, "Your words will take root in people you'll never meet." And I believed her. So I wrote. Each morning, each night, little reflections, small victories, the way sunlight filtered through the curtains, the way the kettle whistled at just the right moment, the way the house healed. And then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from Rachel. It was short, typed, formal. She said she was sorry for how things played out. She hoped I was taking care of the house. She asked if I still had the necklace she wore at the funeral. I did, but I didn't send it, because it wasn't hers. It had never been hers. And some things aren't about revenge. They're about not letting history repeat itself. I wrote her back one sentence, "The house is doing fine." And that was it. Closure, clean and quiet. I think Mom would have liked that. Not the drama, not the court, but the ending, the peace, the quiet legacy that continues without needing to shout. One evening, I found a note tucked into a cookbook, a simple recipe for lemon cake. Underneath, in tiny handwriting, "Make this when it's finally over. You'll know when." I baked it that night, and as the scent filled the kitchen warm, bright, soft, I knew it was finally over, and I was free. The next morning, I opened the windows wide, let the sun pour in like honey. I brewed coffee, not because I needed it, but because I wanted the smell. That bitter, rich aroma that used to fill the kitchen when Mom hummed her old gospel songs. I played one of her records. The vinyl crackled before the first note rang out. It felt like her voice was stitched into the static. I sat at the dining table with the lemon cake, sliced a piece for myself, ate it slowly, let the citrus sit on my tongue like a secret finally spoken, and I smiled. There was no audience, no one to witness this quiet joy. But I didn't need anyone, because this joy wasn't performative. It was mine. I looked around the room, everything in its place, everything earned, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt whole, grounded. Like every ache, every silence, every betrayal had led to this stillness. I took out Mom's blue notebook again, wrote on the last blank page. "Thank you. I found my voice. Mom, and I'm not giving it back." Then I closed it gently, as if tucking her in for the night. The house sighed with me, and somewhere deep in the wood and wind and earth beneath it, I knew she was still here, not watching, not judging, just resting. Like I finally could too. It's strange how a house can hold both endings and beginnings in the same breath. One door closes, another creaks open, and somewhere in between, you find yourself again. I wasn't the same woman who had walked through those courthouse doors. I wasn't even the same daughter who'd held Mom's hand during her final days. Grief had burned something away in me, but it left behind something stronger, still soft, but no longer invisible. I had spent months rebuilding not just the house, but my sense of self. And now, for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without bracing for impact. I started volunteering at the local legal aid office downtown, 3 days a week. I helped women who had lost homes, wills, or worse, faith in the system. And I told them what no one told me, that silence can be strategy, that calm is not weakness, that justice, when it comes from the heart, is unstoppable. One of the women, a grandmother named Patricia, squeezed my hand after we filed paperwork for her late sister's estate. She looked at me and said, "You remind me of someone who remembers where she came from." And that's when I knew this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about purpose, legacy. I renamed the house, not legally, just quietly. I started calling it Evelyn's Porch. That was Mom's name. And every person who came through that door, whether neighbor or stranger, knew that kindness lived here. I hosted Sunday dinners, created a scholarship fund in her name, donated part of the land behind the house to build a community garden, tomatoes, herbs, flowers. People came, dug together, planted hope. And in those shared silences between the shovels and laughter, I found something deeper than forgiveness. I found roots. Rachel never came back, not physically, but every now and then, I'd find reminders, a voicemail with no message, a returned Christmas card. I didn't hate her, but I didn't miss her either. Some people leave a wound, others leave a warning. Rachel left both, and I used both to grow. The last thing Mom ever wrote in that blue notebook was this: "Your sister may never understand you. But that's okay. You weren't born to be understood. You were born to build, and I built a life, a legacy, a quiet empire rooted in truth. One day, years later, a young woman knocked on my door. She was holding a torn manila folder and trembling hands. She said, "I heard you help people who've been erased." I invited her in, made tea, listened, and when she left that night, her steps were steadier. That's what this house had become, not a monument to pain, but a shelter for rebirth. Sometimes, late at night, I still walk the halls barefoot, touch the walls Mom painted herself, smell the lemon oil on the staircase banister, and whisper, "I did it. I really did it." Because even though no one doubted Rachel, no one expected me, and yet, here I was, holding the deed, writing the final chapter. I printed copies of the updated will, framed one for my study, not to gloat, but to remember what it cost to be quiet, what it earned to be patient. There was a time I thought justice meant taking back what was stolen. Now I know. Justice is building something that can't be taken away again. Mom's sapphire ring sits in a small velvet box in my bedroom. I don't wear it often, but I keep it close. Not because of its value, but because it was never about the stone. It was about what endures. And what endures is love wrapped in truth, and truth whispered in silence. This is my story. But I hope it's more than that. I hope someone out there hears it and remembers. You don't have to shout to win. You don't have to fight loud to fight well. You just have to hold your ground. Hold the truth. And when the moment comes, step forward. With every piece of paper, every witness, every quiet, powerful fact. Because when the dust settles and the liars are tired, what's left standing is never the noise. It's the truth. And if you carry that truth long enough, you won't just survive. You'll inherit everything they tried to steal. A few months after that final visit from the girl with the manila folder, I received a letter. It came in a soft gray envelope with no return address. Inside was a simple card. No signature, no apology, just a photo. It was of me and Mom taken years ago, long before the storm. We were sitting on the back steps, eating peach slices from a chipped blue bowl. There was laughter frozen in the image, real joy, the kind you don't fake. I didn't need to guess who sent it. Rachel didn't have to say a word. Some wounds don't close, but they soften. And maybe that was her way of saying she remembered something good. 2. I placed the photo on the mantel, not for reconciliation, but for recognition, that we were both there once, and that the past didn't need to disappear for the future to heal. The scholarship fund grew. I renamed it the Evelyn and Daughters Fund, because it wasn't just for me now. It was for every woman who stayed silent too long, for every daughter who cleaned up the mess and got none of the credit, for every heart that held back tears so no one else would have to cry. At the fund's first annual luncheon, I gave a short speech. I stood behind a wooden podium, hands trembling slightly. The audience was small but attentive, and I said, simply, I didn't grow up knowing how strong I was. I only found out when everything tried to take me down, and I stood anyway. This is not just a house I live in. It's proof. That truth, when protected, can outlive any lie. That silence, when chosen, is the loudest sound in a courtroom. And that love, when buried deep enough, always finds its way back to bloom. They stood when I finished, not because I was loud, but because I was clear,